Your first response then to what happened last night?
I mean, I didn't think it was a surprise. I did think that he was most likely going to win. I mean, if you consider that Kamala Harris only had maybe 3 months of a campaign because Joe Biden hung around for far too long before he decided finally to depart the scene. So she was always going to be up against it. I didn't think she was a terribly impressive candidate either. I think you could tell that she hadn't been through the primary process. She hadn't been tested in any way up against any other potential candidates. So I think that made it difficult for her. And, you know, I think you look at the economic numbers in America as well. It's a cliche, isn't it, that Bill Clinton famously said, it's the economy stupid. And ultimately people will vote with who they think is going to be better for the economy and better for their own personal well-being financially. And they've taken one look at Donald Trump, they've taken a look at Kamala Harris and decided that he is the one, which is a remarkable turnaround, really. You can consider he lost 4 years ago. The January 6th, you went through all the various criminal convictions, the 2 assassination attempts. I mean, utterly remarkable. And not just to win, but to win so comprehensively. I mean, I think another big question is the opinion polls. I mean, the pollsters have got a lot of questions to answer because we were told it was on a knife edge, it could go either way. But in the end, he's absolutely
I think they were scared. I don't know whether, you know, I mean, in an opinion poll HQ, shall we say, collectively, there must have been one poll that you know, they looked at a bit of paper and went, wow, have you seen this, guys? Looks like Trump's going to almost get a landslide here. I wonder whether they got... Because obviously they don't... It's more than their business model's worth, because these are multi-million-pound organisations. They're not cooking the books in that respect. No. But you know, you can make polls do certain things. You know, you very rarely get a national newspaper have a poll result that isn't in favour of the existing editorial line.
There's a way of asking the question.
The way of asking the question. But with this, I wonder whether they all got so scared that they kept... There was a sort of synergy took place between them where they kind of all looked a bit similar. There was no moments where it was a 10% rise to him or her. No. It just bubbled along.
I think they call it herding, is the jargon, you know. They all just sort of coalesce around a position. Because none of them want to be made to look stupid. So there's safety in numbers, basically. You know, you're not an outlier. But to get it so wrong, I mean, for Trump to win the popular vote, not just the Electoral College vote, is really quite incredible. I mean, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote in 2016, but lost. You know, so it's a big deal for the Republicans to win the popular vote as well. And if you look at right across the country, in every demographic, the Republicans made huge advances, and the Democrats have now got a lot of soul searching to.
It's quite interesting, just on that point of the kind of herding mentality. I know the New York Times had, you know, clearly a more Democratic-leaning publication, but as the night began, very quickly, their little swingometer, where they, you know, apparently crunched every database and poll known to mankind, started to say, I think it started out at about 4 a.m, their swingometer said there's a 60% chance that Trump's going to win it. 5 minutes later it was 65, 10 minutes later it was 70, half an hour later it was 75, then it got to about 90%. And I reckon they did the same thing. They didn't want to go, no, we didn't, you know, we at no point did we say Kamala was going to win this. Look at our swingometer. It's like, that's fine, but you didn't bring that out until the last half an hour.
Yeah, until it was blindingly obvious.
It was completely
obvious. Once the results started to come in, where the progress that she needed to make, the places that she needed to be winning in order to, you know, win overall, she wasn't doing that.
And I think, you know, you touched on it in your first answer, Kevin, that the reality is, I say this, I think as kindly and respectfully as I can, she wasn't very good. I mean, she really wasn't very good. There was no big press conferences, as you say. She never went through the primaries, so there was none of that. All the usual fanfare and the cut and thrust of those big debates. There was none of that going on either. She had one mildly successful moment in that tete-a-tete with Trump, but it was... She never looked like... You know, he's got the wow factor, even if you hate him. You know, he's a force to be reckoned with. He's a big, towering figure of energy with lots to say. I'm going to talk on your behalf. And she was this kind of vacuous... collection of platitudes and nonsense.
Yeah, I think it's unlikely that she would have been the candidate had Biden, say, stood down a year ago.
Yeah, I think so.
And said, right, I'm not going to be running this time, and there'd been a slate of candidates brought forward that all went through the primary process. I think it would have been unlikely that Kamala Harris would have been chosen as the candidate. As it turned out, they had no one else because the primary process was over. It was telling, I think, as well, that she seemed to avoid sit-down interviews as much as possible. I think that's a bit of a telltale sign, and voters sniff that. They can tell, hang on a minute, they're hiding this candidate away for some reason.
Correct.
So,
and he was all over TikTok. He was on all the right podcasts, the Rogan podcast. And then Rogan later endorsed him as well. You know, he was kind of hitting all the right buttons.
He was. I mean, a lot of what he says doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but he is out there, and there's no doubt about it.
Music as well, isn't it?
He is an entertainer, and a lot of people, we saw that up to a certain extent in this country with Boris Johnson. You know, a lot of people maybe don't agree with everything that he says, but he passes the sort of "who would you like to have a pint with?" in this country
that's exactly it.
Test,
and
great, looks like a good laugh.
Great at doing optimism as well. I mean, that's a big factor.
Absolutely.
Let's bring it back to sort of home territory. Prime Minister's Question Time. First one for the new Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch. She used that first appearance to call for Keir Starmer to apologise for Foreign Secretary David Lamy, who, of course, had called Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Have a listen to what Badenoch said at Prime Minister's Questions.
I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory this morning. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, "Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order"? And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
The Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance.
The Prime Minister did not distance himself from the remarks made by the Foreign Secretary, and I'm very sure that President Trump will soon be calling to thank him for sending all of those North London Labour activists to campaign for his opponent.
There it is. Well, I mean, she did all right on the first outing, I suppose, but...
All right,
was that the thing to go? I mean, it was topical, but Lamy said this ages ago, of course.
He did say ages ago. She was also trying to embarrass him by dredging up these historic comments. 2017, I think, when he tweeted that stuff. I mean, I think Starmer had a pretty solid response in that, well, we have actually met, we sat down, we had dinner with him for a couple of hours, and it passed off.
And that was only a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. So it seems, from what we can gather, it's going well. David Lamy, as well, I think, has been working very hard behind the scenes to form relationships with Republicans. He's very up on his American politics, David Lamy. He's immersed in it, has been all his entire life, exactly. You know, so he knows what he's talking about, and politically would be more inclined to support the Democrats, obviously, but I think he's probably sensed what way the wind was blowing, and he's been smart. He's got out there, he's formed, as I say, relationships and alliances with a lot of senior Republicans who may well be part of the Trump administration. So yes, it's embarrassing, and I'm sure they'd much rather that he hadn't said it at the time, but as he did. However, I think, you know, even though Trump is very thin-skinned and does bear a grudge, I think going forward, it's more a case of looking forward and facing what's going to come in the future.
If Starmer is worried about whether he can form a relationship with Mr. Trump, then fear not, because Nigel Farage is on hand to offer his help. He was on Talk With Us this morning, speaking to Mike Graham, saying that he would work with the Prime Minister for the future survival of the UK in future dealings with Trump. Here's what Mr. Farage told us earlier today.
Going to need Keir Starmer to roll out the red carpet, and to roll it out PDQ. And Trump will forget what Lamy said. He'll forgive even Sadiq Khan, well, maybe, you know, his behaviour over the last decade. He is a much more forgiving man than people give him credit for. He'll always want to look for a deal. He'll always look to sort of try and do the right thing. And you know what? If I can be helpful in that, I will.
Do you think Mr Starmer will be calling Nige anytime soon to say, I've got a bit of a problem here, Nigel, can you help us out here? Jump on the plane with us, we're off to the White House.
Yeah, I wouldn't be sitting by the phone if I was Nigel Farage, and nor would I expect him to be. I think he's making mischief there. He's obviously just trying to needle Keir Starmer. He knows fine well that Keir Starmer is not going to be asking Nigel Farage to be some sort of conduit or go-between.
But it was a good...
Him.
Yeah,
but it's funny, isn't
you'd expect him to say
absolutely. In fact, they were actually asked, the number 10 were asked about it after PMQ's that specific question, will you, and they politely declined the offer, so unsurprisingly. So I think they can form their own relationships with Donald Trump without any help from Mr Farage.
Well, it was mentioned, Sadiq Khan was mentioned by Nigel Farage then, and it's worth just mentioning, saying what his tweet said in response to Trump. This is the Mayor of London has tweeted this. He says, an important reminder today for Londoners. Our city is and will always be for everyone. We will always be pro-women, pro-diversity, pro-climate, pro-human rights. These are some of the values that will continue to bind us together as Londoners. Now, you can read this one of two ways. I mean, the way I instinctively read that is that Khan has completely missed why Donald Trump just got elected. Because Donald Trump would say, I'm all of that stuff, but I just don't live my life by it. I don't need to identify through the prism of climate or pro-women, etc. Or you could just say, well, Sadiq Khan represents London, and London is kind of on the left, and most Londoners who voted for Sadiq Khan probably hate Donald Trump, so he's only playing to his own election base.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the latter point stands. I think he is. Again, there is history there. Obviously, Nigel Farage alluded to it. You know, they have had their issues in the past, shall we say, Donald Trump and Sadiq Khan. So this is an opportunity for Khan to make clear that he does not agree with Keir Starmer having to welcome his historic victory. Although as Prime Minister, he's got no choice. He can't not welcome it. But Sadiq Khan's just making Londoners aware that the Prime Minister may be saying one thing, but just making it clear, I am not in any way happy that this guy is back in the White House.
Absolutely.
And this is what I stand for.
And if I could just be a pedant of the English language from a journalist perspective, he says we are pro-climate. I mean, what does that even mean? If you put that in a dissertation, you'd be kicked out of university. It doesn't mean anything. We're pro-climate. Everyone's pro-climate. Nobody wants a world without a climate.
Well, the climate is a thing.
It's a thing, right? Yeah. It's like we're pro-air, we're pro-tables. You know, it doesn't mean anything. No, in terms of going forward, Donald Trump, it's going to be interesting. A lot of mood music around things like NATO, for example. Some wondering whether he's going to leg it for the hills from NATO. I don't imagine that being the case, but he's certainly made noise around that.
He has, and when he was in the White House before, he was very forceful in making it clear to NATO allies that they need to stump up, that they're not pulling their weight.
There was that great moment with Angela Merkel, wasn't there, when he literally told her to her face. I mean, I think that was the first time I'd ever seen one world leader berate another world leader publicly on camera. He does
things his own way, there's no doubt about it. Now, he will have advisors round about him who will be part of the defence establishment, who will be making it clear to him that, you know, NATO is essential, you can't leave NATO. But I don't think that will stop him from making the same point again, that why should America be spending however much it is when other countries aren't spending as much. So yeah, that is, I think that's something actually where the US or Trump and Starmer can make common cause, actually, because
we do pay, I think, above our
exactly, and
weight, as it were,
and would like to see other countries in NATO do the same. So I think that is something actually where they could form quite a strong bond over.
The other thing, of course, is the war in Ukraine. That will finish on January the 21st because Donald Trump has told us
something to look forward to.
Yeah, first day in office, I'll sort this thing out. That's not going to be the work of a moment, of course. Zelensky already saying, you know, he's looking forward to working with Trump and praising his history's greatest comeback. He sees it as strengthening, you know, ties, as does Benjamin Netanyahu. They're both saying the same thing here. It's going to be interesting how this does work, though, because there's a real tough game for Trump to play. I mean, harder than if Harris had won, because she hasn't said all this stuff.
No.
But he has. Now, what does he do? Go to visit Zelensky and then jump on a plane to Red Square and see Putin? Can he even be seen to see Putin?
No, I mean, he did see... he did go to North Korea, didn't he, famously?
He did, yes.
Which, you know, was a bit of a kind of Nixon to China moment. It was remarkable. So he did. He does. He's unconventional, you know. So you wouldn't rule it out. But it would be peace at what price, really?
Yeah.
You could have peace tomorrow if Ukraine were to say, right, that's fine, we'll give up all this territory, but they're not going to do that.
Yeah.
You know, and then the question is, well, hang on, if Russia get a deal, are seen to gain from illegally invading a neighbour, then where do they go next?
Yeah,
you know,
what does that
you're
say
almost
for
rewarding them for
indeed.
breaking international law. So yeah, I think he talks a good game in the campaign. But yeah, I think you're right. I don't think we can expect the day after he's inaugurated for the war to end.
Absolutely, and in Israel, I mean, clearly the affinity and the support will be with Israel, but that doesn't mean to say that it's going to stop anything.
No, I mean, Joe Biden was, you know, if anything, even more pro-Israel than Donald Trump, and you know, unfortunately, here we are still over a year since the Hamas atrocity, you know, and the war is still going on. So I think that, I mean, that has bedevilled countless White House administrations, hasn't it? And no one has ever probably further away from peace than we've ever been. So yeah, I think that would be his biggest challenge in terms of foreign policy, I think. There
it is, but it won't be dull, Kevin. You know, and there will be, you know, from a broadcasting and a story count perspective. He's going to be the gift that keeps on giving, and of course there are implications. There will be lots of knock-on effects for us as well, you know, in terms
of course, in terms of the economy. If he starts a trade war with China, like he's threatened to, then obviously that will have massive implications.
60% tariffs. I wonder whether that's going to happen. It might happen on, I don't know, drawing pins or something.
Yeah, something that's inconsequential.
Yeah,
but again, fascinating to see how he approaches that, having talked so tough during the campaign.
Indeed. Kevin, thank you. As ever, Kevin Schofield, political editor at HuffPost.